Have you ever found yourself thinking, I have absolutely no idea what I want to photograph today? You've got the camera, you've got the lens, you've even got a bit of free time for a change, but somehow you just can't think of a reason to go out and take some pictures. So if that sounds like you, you're definitely not alone, and by the end of this video, you'll see your photography in a whole new light. So when you don't have any ideas, you end up doing what most of us have done at some point. You pick up your phone, watch a few YouTube videos, maybe look at a few camera reviews, and then you start wondering whether maybe a new lens might help, or whether it's finally time to upgrade your camera. But here's the thing, after 35 years behind the camera, I don't think the biggest thing holding most photographers back is their gear. I don't even think it's their technique. I think it's something much simpler than that. They don't actually have a reason to go out and take a few photos. And that might sound a bit strange or a little bit harsh maybe, because we all love photography, so surely that should be enough. But I've seen it loads of times. When photography has no direction, it's very easy to lose our motivation. You find yourself wandering around with your camera, hoping something interesting will happen, and if it doesn't, you come home feeling like you've wasted your time. And I know because I've been there. We all have at some point. But before we go any further, if you'd like a place to hang out with hundreds of other photographers who are all on the same journey together, this will be of interest. If you'd like a safe space to continue your photography journey with like-minded people, then why not come and join us in our Photography Foundations community over on School. It's a really safe and friendly place to be. No ads, no algorithms, and no traditional social media nonsense. Just photographers from all around the world who are learning, practicing, sharing and supporting each other. We have an active forum where members post their images, ask questions and share ideas. There's a classroom with structured learning and feedback sessions, a members map so you can see who's near you, and regular challenges and discussions to keep your photography moving forward. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, the link is in the description, or you can use the QR code on the screen. And we'd love to see you there. Okay, so let's get on with it. So let me ask you a question. When you were a kid, did you ever go outside looking for conkers, or shells on the beach, or maybe four-leaf clovers? I never did find one of those, by the way. Anyway, isn't it funny? The moment you give your brain something specific to look for, you start seeing those things everywhere. Or like when you're thinking about getting a new car, suddenly you start seeing the same make, model and colour of the car you want every time you're out driving. But the world hasn't changed, it's just that your attention has. And photography works in exactly the same way. If you walk around thinking, I wonder if there's a good photo here, you maybe won't find one. But if you head out with a simple mission, like I'm going to photograph hands, or I'm looking for beautiful light, or maybe I'm only going to photograph the colour red. Suddenly, your eyes seem to wake up. You notice things that you would have walked past before. You stop hoping to find photographs and you start hunting for them. And that's a massive difference. Because here's the thing. A camera gives you a way to take photographs. A project gives you a reason to do it. And I honestly think that's one of the biggest differences between photographers who stay motivated and those who slowly drift away from the hobby. They don't necessarily have more talent. They don't necessarily have better cameras. They just have something that keeps getting them back out of the door. And once you experience that for yourself, you start to realize that your camera was never the thing that was missing. It was purpose, and that's the whole point. So what exactly do I mean by a photography project? Well, first of all, I'm not talking about something huge. You don't have to travel the world. You don't need to spend thousands, and you certainly don't need to come up with the next great photographic masterpiece. A project is simply a reason to go out with your camera. It gives you a direction, a purpose, and a simple brief. And that absolutely changes everything. So let me give you an example. One of my favourite things to photograph is environmental portraits, and not just portraits of people, but portraits that tell more of a story. And I love photographing people in the places that mean something to them, that mean the most to them. Maybe a carpenter in his workshop, a chef in the kitchen, a musician surrounded by their instruments, or maybe a shop owner who's been serving their community for years and years. The photograph isn't just about the person, it's about their story. And here's the interesting part. Once I decided that was a project I wanted to work on, everywhere I went, I started seeing possibilities. I started thinking about ideas almost subconsciously. I'd walk past a little workshop and wonder, what's going on inside there? I'd see someone working in a florist and think, I wonder what their story is. I'd notice things I'd previously walked straight past. I've changed my way at looking at it. And that's the power of a project. It trains your eyes to notice things that matter to the story you're trying to tell, if that makes sense. Without a project, you're almost waiting for a photograph to find you. With a project, you're actively looking for it. And those are two very different mindsets. It's a bit like walking into a supermarket. If you just wander up and down the aisles, you'll probably buy a few random things. But if you walk in with a shopping list, you know exactly what you're looking for. At least that's how it works for me. You ignore everything else that doesn't matter and you focus on what does. And in a way, a photography project is basically your shopping list. It doesn't limit your creativity, it actually gives you a focus, if you see what I mean. And I'd argue that that's when your photography really starts to grow. So if you're thinking, yeah, all that sounds really great, but I wouldn't even know where to start. And I hear you. But let's make this simple. Your first project doesn't have to last a year. It doesn't have to be exhibition worthy, and it doesn't have to impress anybody else. All it has to do is get you out the door with your camera. That's the whole purpose. In fact, the simpler the project, the better. So let me give you a few examples. You could decide that for the next month, you're only going to photograph doors. Old doors, new doors, colourful doors, weathered doors, and you'd be amazed how many you start to notice. Or perhaps your project is hands. The hands of a carpenter, a gardener, a chef, maybe a grandparent. Hands definitely tell stories. They speak of experience, of hard work, of a life well lived. Or how about shadows? For the next 30 days, you only photograph shadows. Suddenly, you find yourself paying far more attention to light. You start noticing the time of day, the direction of the sun, the shapes that light creates. And without even realizing it, you'll be teaching yourself to see light more effectively. Or maybe your project is closer to home. You could photograph the street where you live every week for a year. Watch how the seasons change, how the light changes, how the people change, and how the little details begin to reveal themselves. And the thing is, the subject isn't really the point. The project is. Can you see where this is going? Because what you're really doing is training yourself to be more observant. And observation is definitely one of the most important skills a photographer can develop. And here's something else I've learned over the years. Limitations aren't the enemy of creativity. Very often, they're the thing that actually creates it. When you give yourself complete freedom, you can photograph anything. And weirdly, that can feel really overwhelming. But if you give yourself one simple self-inflicted rule, something really simple, your brain immediately has something to work with. Does that make sense? It becomes a challenge. It's a kind of game or a treasure hunt, if you like. And before you know it, you're enjoying the process far more than you were before. Because you're no longer walking around asking yourself, what shall I photograph today? You're asking, I wonder where I'll find the next one. And that's a completely different mindset. And it's actually a far more enjoyable way to experience photography. See, here's the great thing about all of this. You might start the project thinking it's about photographing doors, or shadows, or local characters, or whatever. But after a few weeks, you begin to realize that it was never actually about the subject at all. It was about you. You've started seeing light differently. You've started noticing composition without even giving it too much thought. You've become more observant, more patient, and more curious. And that's the beauty of a good photography project. It quietly teaches you things you didn't even realize you were learning. You don't just come away with a collection of photographs. You come away as a better photographer. So what's not to like? I think too many of us judge a day out with our camera by the number of photographs we bring home. If we come home with 50 images, it's been a good day. If we come home with none, we feel like we failed. And I totally get that. But I don't see it like that anymore. Some of my most enjoyable days with the camera have ended up with not producing many pictures at all. But they've definitely given me some ideas. They've given me conversations, experiences, and always taught me something. To me, that's never a wasted day. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that every time you go out with a purpose, you succeed, whether you press the shutter or not. Because you're training your eye. You're building the habit of observation. You're learning to slow down. And all of those things will eventually show up in your photographs. Not today or tomorrow maybe, but over time they will. Better photography isn't always about collecting more information. It's about collecting more experiences along the way. And a good project gives you exactly those experiences. It gives you a reason to have conversations with people you'd never otherwise have met. It encourages you to visit places you've otherwise have driven straight past. It makes you notice beauty in the ordinary. And when you start seeing the world a little bit differently, your photographs can't help but change as well. So if you just take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Stop asking yourself, what shall I photograph today? And instead start asking yourself, what project could I start today? Because that one simple question might change your photography far more than your next camera ever will. So let's just recap for a minute. Today we talked about why so many of us lose motivation. Not because we've fallen out of love with photography, but because we've lost our sense of purpose. We've seen that a project doesn't have to be big or complicated. It just has to give you a reason to pick up your camera. We talked about how a simple project trains your eye to see the world differently. And perhaps most importantly, we discovered that projects don't just produce photographs, they help you develop as a photographer. So here's my challenge for you. Sometime this week, don't go out looking for the great photograph. Go out looking for the start of a great project. Keep it simple and don't overthink it. And don't worry about whether anybody else will find it interesting. This isn't about creating your best photograph. It's about becoming a better photographer. It's about giving yourself a reason to actually pick up your camera. Giving yourself a reason to slow down. A reason to notice the world around you. Because once you have a purpose, something really interesting happens. You stop wondering whether you should go out with your camera or not, and you start looking for the next opportunity. Then, before you know it, you're shooting more often, you're enjoying it more, you're seeing more, and without really noticing, you're becoming a better photographer. Not because you bought a new camera, or you learned another camera setting, but because you gave yourself a reason to create. So if you were to start a project tomorrow, no pressure, but what would it be? Let me know down in the comments. And it doesn't have to be clever or complicated. Just tell me your idea, because you never know. Your project or your idea might be the very thing that inspires somebody else here to pick up their camera this weekend. And I know that for a fact, because my great friend Glyn is working on his I Am Line project. And guess what? That's inspired me to get off my backside and get on with a project of my own. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a like. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing for more videos like this. And finally, I'll leave you with this thought. The best camera in the world can't give you a reason to create, but a simple project absolutely can. And I think that makes all the difference. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you soon.